I would like to welcome everyone to the April 26th council meeting in the city of Mayfield Heights. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Valstria.
Present.
Mr. DeJohn.
Here.
Mrs. Finney. Mr. Mano.
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Here.
Mrs. Snyder.
Here.
Mrs. Teresi.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll move to the approval of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting that was held on April 12, 2021. I hope everyone has had time to read these minutes over. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Mrs. Finney, second by Mrs. Teresi. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to those minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay. These minutes have been approved as written. Next is the approval of the minutes from our council meeting of April 12, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mr. Balestrea. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to those minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 These minutes have been approved as written. Next, we will move to correspondence and announcements. Does any member of council have any correspondence or announcements? Mrs. Teresi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just had a couple residents ask me when we would be opening City Hall for people to attend. To attend the meetings, yes.
Well, technically, we could now, if we controlled the amount of people allowed in the room at a time. But I don't know, it's up to council too. I mean, it's your guys' meeting. If you feel comfortable letting people in, it's kind of up to you, but, you know, it's,
I didn't know if we had to follow COVID rules yet.
well, they have lightened them up, some, but it's kind of, how one council and this body feels comfortable.
Thank you. And then my other question, the same residents asked me about that they enjoy watching these council meetings now that are streamed. And they're wondering if we can do planning, BZA, parks, or architectural, if they can watch all of them, since we have so much going on in the city.
That's a possibility, but we would have to explore who would run those, run the equipment for all those meetings, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Teresi. Mr. Mano. We can definitely check the rules that are out there for other, for our meetings, and I can send an email to everybody, and we can look into it that way, how everybody's comfort level is. Mayor?
Yeah, and I would just say you probably want to come up with some rules and regulations, how many people, how we're going to keep them out there, who would supervise that too.
Okay, we'll look into it. Are there any other comments from council? Next, we'll move
Wait,
to.
real quick,
I'm sorry.
I mean, people actually want to come, they never came before. That's
I think it
They miss us?
probably, I would guess it would have had to do with like Woodhawk, and so they were saying, when can we come? So I didn't know if it was still COVID restriction or, I mean, we're still not a full council here, so I didn't know what to say. You're still standing outside in line at Heinen's if they have the majority in the store, so I thought it'd be best to ask.
We can definitely look into it, and I can get a message to everybody before the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Next, we will move to reports of officers, starting with the mayor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for participating in this meeting tonight. Last Friday, we advertised for RFQs, requests for qualifications for professional architect and engineering services for the new community center and aquatic center. Qualified firms will be interviewed, and we anticipate selecting an architectural firm in June. I heard from our team that we are getting a lot of interest, which is good. It's always good to see new development and growth in the city. Hillcrest Hospital's architects submitted plans for approximately 11,000 square foot expansion of the existing cancer center. This will be a second floor addition supported by a covered area to allow patients to be dropped off or picked up. And I spoke to Hillcrest today. I had some communication with them, and they did send out notification to the neighborhood behind the hospital, and they are going to be doing periodic updates and to let everybody know how things are going and the progress of the construction. We plan to plant a white cherry tree in the city park on April 23rd to commemorate Earth Day. However, the weather did not cooperate, so therefore we will plant a tree this Friday to honor Arbor Day. The city's annual Shred and Recycle Day is scheduled for Saturday, May 8th between 9 a.m. and noon. The shred truck will be parked at the city tennis courts on Marsal. You can drop off paper documents that will be shredded on site, and we will collect electronic equipment for recycling. We're not collecting hazardous waste products such as paint or chemicals this year. Cleveland Water Department will be conducting maintenance work on their Beechwood water tower. Scheduled work will be done through May 21st. So I have heard people complain about some low water pressure and discoloration, and that could be as a result of the water tower being worked on. And that concludes my report.
Are there any questions for the mayor? I saw your hand, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. So do we know how residents can get rid of paint and chemicals? Does anybody know how?
I think it's still available through the county, but I'll double check with you. I'll let you know. That's a good question.
Yes,
I'll find out.
maybe we can let the residents know
Yeah.
that, because if they can't find a place, they're gonna dump them in the environment,
Right.
so,
Yep.
thank you.
Are there any other questions for the mayor? Moving to the law director, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no formal report, but I have two notations for the agenda. It is suggested that a resolution which would approve the lot split for Mayland be added to the agenda and approved tonight. All of the administrative reviews, including the Planning Commission, have been completed, so it is ripe to be voted on by council. And a draft resolution number 2021-38 is at council's place. So I would suggest after 2021-37 is considered, then this be added to the agenda as 2021-38. Secondly, under motions, there should be a motion to solicit bids for rock salt. The Service Department has requested that bids be solicited at this time. So when we get the motions, if we could have somebody make a motion to solicit bids for rock salt, that would be appropriate. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Are there any questions? Director of Finance, Mrs. Fagan.
Thank you. I have no formal report this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan. Are there any questions for the Finance Director? Next, we will move to reports of committees, commissions, and boards, starting with the Building Committee, Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Building Committee has not met, so I have no report.
Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. Balestrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have no report this evening.
Moving to Legislative Committee, Mrs. Finney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do not have a report either.
Public Works and Service, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. We do have 4 items on the agenda tonight. 2 of them have to do with accepting bids for Gates Mills in the Ashcroft neighborhood, and the other 2 are bids for asphalt and concrete. So we can ask Mr. Gerson any questions when those come up. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Recreation and Parks, go back to Mr. DeJohn. Mr. Mano, you have a question.
Are we still doing the program of the chipper following the garbage trucks, or do you have to call and
It's-
request a chipper if you have
No,
debris?
as far as I know, it's still supposed to be following the garbage truck. Well, either coming before it or after it. Maybe,
I haven't seen the chipper at all. I got a guy across the street from me has a pile on his front lawn for 3 weeks, and I've not seen a chipper at all.
so I'll contact our service director, Mr. Fatika, and ask him about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Moving to Recreation and Parks, Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Our annual spring shootout for Bocce is right around the corner on Saturday, May 8th. This event kicks off the summer season. Interested teams may call 440-442-2627 for more information, or email Sean@mayfieldheights.org. Deck Hockey is hosting free try-it days on May 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 23rd. No registration is required. Come to the city park near the pool between 1 and 2 p.m. for children in kindergarten to 5th grade. You can call the rec department for more information. Heart Saver AED class will be held in the fire department on May 12th at 6 o'clock until 8:45 p.m. Pre-registration is required. The fee is $20. This class is for teachers, coaches, fitness professionals, babysitters, and scout leaders. To register or for more information, call 440-442-2627. That's my report. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Mano? Just want to remind all council members to please talk into your microphone so that the residents can hear you. We're having a little difficulty. Thank you. Safety and Transportation, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report.
Thank you. Board of Zoning Appeals, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, the Board of Zoning met on April 13th. The council has the meeting minutes. There is one item on the agenda this evening, Resolution 2021-33. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any questions? Okay. Planning Commission, Mr. Balistrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Planning Commission did not have an agenda last week, therefore we did not meet, and I have no report.
Thank you, Mr. Balistrea. Next, we will move to comments from the public. Due to the COVID-19 crisis, the state of Ohio has established guidelines for public gatherings in effort to keep residents, all members of public council representatives, and other city employees safe during this time. The city of Mayfield Heights has closed the city council meetings to public attendance. Because public participation and transparency are important values of the city, residents are invited to view the meeting via live streaming and broadcast. Additionally, questions or comments may be submitted to the council office by noon on Monday, 26th, to Karen E. Fagan at the city's website. I believe she has 2 pieces of correspondences that she would like to read this evening.
I do have 2 pieces of correspondence to read. The first is from Wayne Natale at 6440 Woodhawk. And it reads, after reading the recent article in the Sun Messenger regarding the Woodhawk Connector Project, many of us on Woodhawk Drive remain baffled and concerned that needed repairs to our street will go uncompleted for at least another year or longer, according to the mayor's comments in the article. Clearly, this body had no intention, grant or no grant, to complete any repair work to Woodhawk Drive in 2021. This became obvious when Mr. Balestrea's Public Works Committee and council approved the 2021 road repairs slate weeks ago, leaving one of the streets in the poorest condition off the schedule before even knowing whether the requested grant would be approved or not. According to the mayor, even if approved, the city would still need to come up with another $500,000 to complete the project. Where are those earmarked funds, and why can't they be used to get started on the repairs needed for this street? Repair promises have been made for 2 years now. So much for your mantra, promises made, promises kept. Residents are still looking forward to the meeting that has been promised for months to let you know in person what you have had a hard time accepting in writing. We have all had access to the master plan and drawings of what this project proposed. We do not need further explanations or sales pitches. We are not now, nor will we be in favor of narrowing Woodhawk or running a multi-purpose trail down our street. I sensed a concern in the mayor's comments about the cost to properly repair this street. The need for these repairs did not happen overnight. They have been years in the making. Why hasn't this been accounted for in your long-range planning? This street is nearly 40 years old. It held up pretty well, but it's time to get the job done. How much would have been saved had it been addressed 2 years ago? How much more is it going to cost waiting another year or longer? The price of concrete has not gone down. It's time to get this entire Woodhawk connector off the table and get on with the business of taking care of the needs of the people you were elected to serve. The second piece of correspondence is from Richard Warby at 6391 Woodhawk, and it is addressed to all of council. My question to the council is, how did the city expect to pay for the Woodhawk and Corporate Park part of the project? Also, does Mayor Anthony DeSico and the 3 current council members have every intention in bringing back a similar proposal in 21-22? In the recent April 17th Cleveland.com article, it states NOACA turned down a $500,000 request from the city to repair Woodhawk Drive and add a multi-purpose connector trail to the north side of the street. The same article states, DeSico said the $500,000 grant would have paid for nearly half of the proposed work. Is the mayor and council saying the cost of the project would be $1 million? The NOACA agency projected the project cost at $1.4 million to $1.7 million in their study. Had the NOACA funding been approved for the project, it appears the city would have their portion of the financing available to complete the construction. If that is true, then those additional funds could be made available to repair the street this year. What is troubling is a clear majority of the persons directly impacted by the project do not want it, yet it appears to still be on the table according to the article. An open and honest dialogue is not being presented by elected officials, and Mayfield Heights residents will hold them accountable at the ballots. And that concludes the 2 pieces of correspondence.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan. At this time, I will open up the meeting to anyone who is here this evening with an agenda item. You may approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. Is there anyone that would like to be heard? Seeing none, we will close the public portion.
Madam Chair, before you move on, I'd like to address some of the comments about the Woodhawk project, if I could.
Sure. Go ahead.
There's a lot of misinformation, rumors, and just untruths floating around. I just want to clarify that our process for choosing streets for the road program is the city engineer and our service director inspect streets every year. And they rate them according to the overall condition of the street, the last time repairs were made, what extent the repairs would be and the cost of those repairs. So the cost and what the city needs to put out per road is factored into the list. It's factored into how high the rating of the street is and when it should be repaired. Woodhawk is relatively high on that list. We know it needs to be repaired, but frankly, it was moved up on the list when we could get a lot of money to help us repair it. So that's what the residents, I think, are misinformed there. There was no money earmarked for Woodhawk this year. if we would have got the grant and if the residents would have been, would have gone along with the idea of the trail and been amicable to that plan, we could have, we would have went back and council could have voted to increase the road budget. But as it stands now, just to redo the road, and I don't have a number on the top of my head. Do you, Dan, if we just fix the road without doing anything else, it's not a tear out, correct? Yeah. I just think this needs to be talked about right now because.
Madam President, I did have that discussion with Mr. Gerson today, and he has three proposals for that road.
Yeah. And
Mr. Gerson.
Yeah, so Dan Gerson, city engineer, Mayfield Heights. There's been a lot of options that we've thrown out there in terms of what to repair with the road. Right now, it's concrete street, 30-foot wide. I'll tell you that we looked at narrowing the road even before the trail came out, and one of the reasons is Joe Finaro told me that people were complaining about speeding down there. Narrowing the road makes it less likely people are going to speed down that road. There's no doubt about that in my mind. So what we looked at is the amount of repair on a 30-foot wide road. You could narrow it, and the money you'd save on not repairing 6 feet of it by narrowing it, you could do a lot nicer job. Some of the options we looked at right now, it's concrete street. A lot of the joints are failing. There has been ongoing maintenance on that over the years by the service department, replacing joints. As you can see, there's some new joints out there. Some of the new joints are now failing. So what we looked at doing is, one option is continue repairing the joints, and you'd have a patchwork quilt-looking roadway. It wouldn't ride very smooth, and that's one option. That cost roughly right now is probably about $350,000 to $400,000 to do just concrete repair joints. What I would suggest is that if we're not going to narrow the road and keep it 30-foot wide, then the other option is do concrete repair to the joints and then do an asphalt overlay, similar to what we're going to plan on doing on Parkland. So what you'll have is you'll have an asphalt surfaced road when you're done, and that would keep it roughly, keep it 30 feet wide, keep the same reveal in the curbs, and that would be probably about $700,000. If you went and you totally reconstructed the road at 30-foot wide, you're probably pushing $2 million to do that. I believe it's as long as Commonwealth, and it's a couple more feet wider. And that's an option, and I would say the cost is very expensive just because one of the problems you have with that road, it's a one way in, one way out. So where we do Commonwealth, Genesee, and Wharton, we can do one way and people can get in and out. When you have only one way in, one way out, it slows the construction down a whole lot. So that would factor into cost. So at this point, it's really up to, we talked with Mr. DeJohn. I would say the next step is maybe schedule a public works meeting, discuss the options, see if there's money available to do it this year. If you wanted to do concrete repair as an overlay and council approves it, you could probably do that work this year. It would be a late project. If you wanted to look at doing something different in terms of a reconstruct or some other thing, you'd have to prepare plans that would show that work, and that would be a next year's project if council so chose and there was money available for that. So that's kind of the options that are out there at this point. You are correct. One of the ideas of getting the trail, other than it was in the TLCI grant, was that it would provide money to do some of those repairs to the road. And so the overall cost would be somewhat offset by the trail, which was a win-win, I thought, for the city. But obviously, the residents aren't in favor of that, and so here we are at this point, so.
Thank you, Dan. Mr. Mano?
Two things. One, I wouldn't have a problem with an asphalt overlay as long as they used a good strength asphalt like they use on the freeway because of the traffic, the amount of traffic.
Hey, Don, can you
Talk
pull that?
closer, pull it closer to you.
Is your mic on?
Yeah,
It is?
the lights on.
Just pull it closer.
Okay, there you go. Just, yeah, there you go.
The other,
Oh, there you go.
the other
Works.
thing is, every conversation that comes up about Woodhawk always includes the factor of speeding. That has been a problem there for the last 20 years. The problem, I think, can be solved especially now with the equipment that we have. Post signs at either end of the street. There will be zero tolerance enforcement. Put the speed cameras, the read cameras there, the plate readers, and start ticketing the people who are speeding on that street. And I guarantee you, after 6 months, and people getting tired of paying fines and going to court, they will slow down. I mean, you know, it's something that you can't put a police officer there. They talked about the possibility of speed bumps. You can't do that. The plate readers seems to be the easiest solution to that problem. Post the signs, even if you want to give them 30 days warning, there will be zero tolerance. If that speed limit is 25 miles an hour, if you do 26, you're going to get nailed. That's the only way you're going to control that. And I've said that time and time and time again, and I don't know why we just can't do that up there and try to solve at least one aspect of their problem, which is the speeding. I've had people tell me people come out of those condo driveways, they don't even look if there's traffic coming. They just come right out into the street. So it seems like an easy solution, and I don't know why it's something that we can't do. Thank you.
Mayor, did you have something?
No, well, yeah, just getting back to the original point we were talking about is, I think we need to have a serious discussion about the street and how long just an overlay would last us. Especially since those joints are failing and they'll continue to fail even with an overlay. So that's what I worry about. And what's the long-term health of the street? I mean, I'd rather, you know, if we spend $700,000 to overlay it or $2 million to rebuild it, I think it's money well spent if we can, you know, fit it into our budget at some point to rebuild it and be done with it. Because it does get a lot of traffic.
Right.
Very, very good points. We'll definitely explore all those options, and I think, like I say, present at a Public Works meeting, have those discussions, talk about the costs, and make sure we're all on the same page, and then we can present it to council.
Thank you. Mrs. Tressi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Gerson, you're familiar with like going around Dead Man's Curve or prior to that where they have those like
There, rumble strip.
whatever the rumble thing I don't know what they call them, in the street. Is that something I don't know if that, helps eliminate the speeding, or
So.
is
yeah,
it
so-
something that can be done if you redo the street?
So there's a lot of things you can do. We did this in another city we were at. We went through, it was a street, there was a condo association that sped down the street, and neighbors all complained, and, many times it's all the residents that are speeding because no one else comes down there, unfortunately, so. But we looked at speed bumps, which you see in typical parking lots, you go over them.
Yeah.
And then there's the speed tables, which come up kind of flat and then go back down. You could do rumble strips, you could post speed limits. The tough things about the rumble strips and the speed bumps and the speed tables, the speed bumps and the speed tables both have a problem. We get a lot of snow up here, so you have a snowplow going down, you hit it with a snowplow, wreck the truck, whatever you do. And then the other thing that people don't think about is what happens is the speed bumps and the rumble strips also cause noise. So 2 o'clock in the morning, people are driving home from work, whatever it may be, got that constant noise, you hit it, and then you get the residents complaining about the noise. So there's pros and cons to each of that. The basic technology that you look at is, not making the street so much of a highway, and that was the idea of narrowing it. And again, that's one of the criteria that happens. Not saying that has to happen, but it seemed like a win-win at the time. But speed tables, I know there's one in City of Mentor. I talked to the service department there, and they absolutely hate it. And most times it really doesn't slow people down because they know it's there, and they slow down, and then they get over it and they speed up. And so it's probably, if you really want to control it, other than physical to the street, it's enforcement. But then do you park a car there 24 hours a day? At some point, it's a situation. And keep in mind, it's not necessarily an overall bad thing, but every street you pave. I know the police chief always asks, what streets did you pave this year? Because we know people are going to be speeding. It's nice and smooth, so you have,
Yeah, I
Problems
think
either
you
way.
still have it on Commonwealth. Still have speeders because it's just smooth, but I kind of agree with the mayor about if we're going to spend 700,000, we may as well just do it once and get it over with, like we did with Commonwealth and Genesee, and,
yeah.
and we knew we were going to do that road sooner or later. We probably should just look at getting it done.
Yeah, like I say, let's get the options on the table, see what the best solution is for the city, and then we can present it to Public Works, and Public
Mr.
Works can make a recommendation.
Mr. Gersten, we would
Yes.
look at this for this year? Or,
So-
next year, I mean.
I guess, if Public Works wants to have a meeting this year, I would say we could still have it this year, and depending on what those options are.
Okay.
There are some options that you could do this year if you so chose to do it. You would not be able to reconstruct it this year at all.
Right,
If you
okay.
wanted to do the concrete repairs and overlay, you could do that this year. It would be a late project, but it's still time you could do that this year.
Mr. DeJohn, if you want to call a meeting
Yes,
and review.
yes, we can go ahead and schedule that, and Shanisha can take care of that.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah, I mean, this whole conversation we're having now just points out the whole process and the intricacies of figuring which street goes where, when it gets repaired, how much we're going to spend on it, and what should actually be done. Yeah, we could throw, $300,000 at it and make some of the residents happy, but is that the right thing to do over time? That's the one thing the residents who've written all these letters need to understand. It's not just a matter of, we're gonna, you got the money, just do this or do that. We got to figure out what's the right thing to do for the street, and the right thing to do in our road program, and where it slates, where it sits in the whole listing of streets. So I just want them to be aware of that. It's a process, and I think we've been true to our process, and it's been a good process. And as far as keeping promises, we've spent $7 million in road work this year, so I think we're keeping our promises.
Thank you. I'm glad we brought this subject up. I know Mrs. Fagan's been reading letters for many, many weeks now, and I think this was a good time to discuss this. So thank you. Okay, it's 7:35. I'm going to close the public portion, and we will move to resolutions. Starting with 2021-33, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution 2021-33, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Advanced Installation and Sign on behalf of Starbucks, 5836 Mayfield Road, a variance from Section 1191.06A of the codified ordinances to install signage above the roof line, Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 861-24-054. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mrs. Finney,
Second.
second by Mr. Belestrea. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes,
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes,
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes,
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes,
Mrs. Finney.
Yes,
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano,
second.
second by Mr. Belestrea. This all pertains to the new Starbucks on Mayfield Road. All members should have received the memo from the Board of Zoning. And it was a unanimous vote, I believe. Mrs. Sabetta, is there anything you would like to add to this?
yes, the applicant is not here, and he stated his practical difficulty was the west elevation visibility, the north wall, the lower elevation, the best location for visibility. He states that the architecture of the canopy is creating a practical difficulty with the site of the signage. He said that they do this at Starbucks in other areas, and council should have a picture. It's not going to be on the building roof line, but on the gazebo. It was a unanimous vote, and all members were present.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any questions?
Madam
Mrs.
Chairman.
Teresi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mrs. Sabetta, what was the practical difficulty on the west? What was that?
The north wall is where the sign would be, which is on Mayfield Road,
Right?
and it sets back from the gazebo, and coming west, it would not be able to be seen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to strike above the roof and add above the gazebo line in this ordinance.
I'll second it.
Above the roof,
It-
above the gazebo?
Yeah.
Roll call. What, Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes. This was brought up at the meeting. We would like buildings that have stepped roofing. What was considered, it still has a parapet, and the ordinance states parapet. So I don't know if the ordinance is stating a parapet.
What,
And
Mrs.
if you
Teresi.
change above the gazebo, that's not what's in the ordinance. That's not what we're voting on, I should say. Does that,
Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, that's correct. You're voting right now to confirm the decision of the Board of Zoning Appeals in granting the variance as it was requested. If council doesn't want to grant the variance, then this would be voted down, and then pursuant to ordinance, then a substitute resolution would be introduced at the next meeting, which would modify the decision or reverse the decision. It's really up to council, but it's not proper to amend this right now because that would be modifying the resolution.
Mr. DeJohn?
So I guess I don't understand why it says the roof if this is really on the gazebo, which is not the roof of the building. So I don't know why, BZA approved it that way then. So, as you can see your photo inside your packet there, the sign is on the gazebo, which is, you can call it an awning of the building.
I'm just going on what his application was. The application states that Starbucks is seeking a variance to allow signage set above the roof line, and that's what was considered by the Board of Zoning Appeals. I don't have their minutes, so I can't state what went on at the meeting, but the information I have is that they requested above the roof line, and that was granted.
So I guess it's my understanding that this will be above the roof line on the gazebo. Is that correct, Mrs. Sabetta?
yes.
that's what it said, that's the application.
No, this is not. This is,
It's not the application.
no, this is what's prepared by our building department, the application.
Mrs. Snyder?
Here, I
Mr.
have the application too.
Balestrea?
Yeah, just a clarification maybe from the law director, because the application says it's a request for a variance to have the signage above the top of the parapet wall. Are you referring to the parapet wall as synonymous with the roof line? Or is the parapet wall atop
I
of
don't
another
know.
structure? I'm sorry?
The application says roof line.
I'm looking at it right here.
That was prepared by our building department.
Well, that's my
not
que-
the-
that's my
That's not
question.
the application.
Okay, that's my question. Is the parapet wall, would it be considered the same as the roof line, in your opinion? Or is a parapet another structure
It's above the roof
attached
line.
to the building?
I don't know.
Okay.
Madam Chairman,
Mrs. Tressi.
So, Mr. Murphy is saying that this is prepared by our building department, but here's the request to appear. Is that the application? So,
That's the application.
so this application says, allow for Starbucks sign to be mounted on the roof line of canopy per drawings. Starbucks likes the visibility and proximity of the sign to the entrance of the location. And ordinance 119106 does not allow for signage to set above the roof line. So Starbucks is seeking a variance to allow above the roof line.
I'm not sure, there is a parapet wall there, or is a parapet roof?
Madam Chair,
I don't know.
I mean, from the photos and from the discussion at Board of Zoning Appeals, I mean, it's apparent what they voted on. I mean, it's semantics to call it a parapet above the roof line or whatever. I'm not sure, what the, I mean, maybe worried about setting a precedent above a roof line or something like that, but they're still going to have to come to Board of Zoning Appeals if in the future they want to go above the roof line, just like they did here. But it's apparent what they voted on. I mean, there's a photo of what they voted on.
It does state that there was further discussion as to what constitute a parapet. And he stated that it's not above the building line, but above the roof line, and the roof line of the gazebo is what it states here.
Ms.
Mr.
Snyder.
Belstrao.
Yeah, Mr. Murphy, in the application, if it says under the reason, they're talking about the allowing Starbucks sign to be mounted on the roof line of the canopy. So they're not, I think we're being confused with the roof line of the building and the roof line of the canopy
Where are you reading that, Mark?
in their application,
It's in the application.
under reasons for the variance.
Here.
So
Yeah.
they're describing roof line as the canopy roof line versus the building roof line, and I think maybe that's where council's a little bit confused.
You could see it in the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it in the
There.
picture.
So if that's against the ordinance, to have that above a canopy roof line, then that's the variance that they're seeking. And maybe, is that correct, Mrs. Sabetta?
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes, thank you. The proposal states the request of variance to have signage above the top of the parapet wall. Each roof, the way I understood it, stepping, that is still considered a roof even though it's a canopy or a gazebo. It is a parapet. So it's not allowed there, but he's stating his visibility is why he needs it there, because it extends out, the wall is in, and that's where it belongs on our ordinances, on the wall, and not above the wall.
Mrs. Tressi.
Did we not give McDonald's 10 months of aggravation because they wanted an M above on their front thing with a, above, and
Above the roof
the new
line.
piece
The
was
actual
going to be
roof line, yeah.
above, it was above the parapet. The parapet's above the roof. Your roof ends here, then there's a parapet. Behind that parapet is typically where you would put air conditioning, equipment, et cetera. And didn't we give McDonald's like 10 months of, we're not going to give them an M for that?
I don't think so.
No?
No? It wasn't? Wow. Okay.
Mr. DeJong.
So just one last question, to put this to bed. So this drawing that we have in our packet showing the signage is accurate, correct?
Yeah.
Well, they still have to go to ABR.
So this is, but this is the drawing that they're going to present
Yes.
to ABR?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, are there any further questions?
Call for the vote.
Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this resolution has been approved. Resolution 2021-34, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2021-34, a resolution awarding a contract to Roniak Paving, Inc. for the Gates Mills Boulevard resurfacing project in accordance with the bid specifications and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by
Move,
Mr.
Finney.
DeJohn, second by Mr. Mano. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mrs. Trustee, second by Mr. Balestria. This bid was recommended by the city engineer. It came in as the lowest bidder at $490,967. This will be going towards the Gates Mills Boulevard resurfacing project. And Mr. Gerson, do you have anything to add with this one or the next few? No, okay. Any questions for Mr. Gerson or Mr. DeJohn? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. This resolution has been adopted. Moving to Resolution 2021-35, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2021-35. A resolution awarding a contract to CA Agresta Construction Company for the Ashcroft Neighborhood Pavement Improvements Project in accordance with the bid specifications and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move,
Moved by
Finney.
Mr. DeJohn, second by Mrs. Finney. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mrs. Sabetta. This bid was awarded to CA Agresta as the lowest bidder for the Ashcroft Neighborhood Pavement Project, and this came in at $1,247,740, sorry. Are there any questions? Mrs. Teresi?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have a question for Mr. Gerson. So when we did Commonwealth and Genesee, we spent $1 million or $1 million plus to do those roads. Is 1.2 million, it doesn't seem like very much to do, what are there, 6 streets in the Ashcroft area? Why is it so inexpensive versus doing just Commonwealth or Genesee?
So it's not because I'm that good, but anyways, the difference is on Commonwealth and Genesee and Wharton, those are reconstruct projects, so we totally took the entire road out, including drive aprons, and replaced it with a new concrete street. In this case, in the evaluation, we went through and looked at the streets, and on this area, what had happened was, when they put the asphalt over the existing concrete years ago, they didn't grind the gutter, and so they just added the asphalt to the gutter, and so they lost the reveal in the gutter. And so what was happening, in my opinion, is that the water is not getting down the street, so it's not only not crowning off the street, but it's not getting to the curbs and then not getting into the catch basins. And so this project, what we're going to do is we're going to saw cut basically 30 inches off of each side of the road, take out the curb in its entirety, and replace it into a concrete curb again. And so you'll have a 30-inch wide concrete curb and gutter on both sides of the road, and then the center section of the road will remain in place. However, we'll take off the asphalt, do the repairs underneath, and then put asphalt back over. So what residents will see in this neighborhood is when they drive down the center approximately 18 feet will be asphalt, and then the sides, approximately 30 inches, will be concrete. And then we also, in the process of making this design, we decided that in order to make sure we get a good flow, we replaced all the drive aprons from the sidewalk closest to the road. So they'll have a nice smooth transition from their road to the driveway, similar to what it was probably when they originally bought the house. So you'll have a smoother area, smoother ride. So a totally different construction process in this case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerson. Are there any further questions? Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria,
Yes?
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution 2021-35 has been approved. Resolution 2021-36, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2021-36, a resolution accepting a certain bid for asphalt and declaring an emergency. The proposed contractor and low bidder is Kokosing Materials, Inc.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move?
Moved by Mr. Belstrea, second by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes?
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move, Finney.
By Mr. DeJohn, second by Mrs. Finney. This is to furnish the asphalt for the 2021 road program. I'm not sure how much it is.
If I could.
Mr. Gerson?
Yeah, so this is for the use for the service department for making repairs when there's water valves that are broken, or if they have spot repairs they need to do the roads. So in this case, this is a bid per ton for asphalt when the service department needs it. So it wouldn't be necessarily for the road program,
sorry.
it'd be for repairs.
Thank you.
And just in this case, the actual low bid contractor, they submitted the bids and they didn't follow the rules with the legal notice. So attempts to contact them to revise their bid or throw out that language they had in it was unsuccessful. So we went with the second bidder, which is the Kokosing Materials.
Okay. Thank you. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes?
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution 2021-36 has been adopted. Moving to Resolution 2021-37, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2021-37, a resolution accepting a certain bid for concrete and declaring an emergency. HGE Concrete Supply Company is the proposed contractor and low bidder.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move?
Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mrs. Tressi. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes?
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by
Move,
Mr.
Finney.
DeJohn, second by Mrs. Tressi. I'm just going to turn this over to you, Mr. Gerson.
Thank you. So again, this is for concrete supply for the service department for making spot repairs, again, water valves, catch basins, whatnot. If they have to do a sidewalk repair where there's a trip hazard throughout the city, that would be what this is for. And again, we had solicited bids and we had 5 contractors. HGE Concrete Supply provided the lowest and best bid on this project.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. DeJohn?
Mr. Gerson, do you test the concrete for its strength? Is that something you do? So if they say they give us, 8.5 sacks and it's only 7.5 sacks, do you actually test for that?
So in this case, when the concrete comes for the service part, we're not involved in that work. But when you do concrete on streets, there are testing agencies that make sure the slump is right, that are employed in the city when they do that work. The mixed design comes from the concrete company, but there are tests to make sure the water content is right and whatnot through there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes,
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this resolution has now been adopted. Okay, at this time, I need a motion to place Resolution 2021-38 on the agenda
So
tonight.
moved.
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mrs. Finney, second by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call to place this on tonight's agenda.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
yes,
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to let Mr. Murphy read Resolution number 2021, or 2021-38.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Resolution number 2021-38, a resolution approving a lot split of permanent parcel number 861-28-045 owned by First Mayland Properties Limited and known as 5834 through 5926 Mayfield Road. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Move, Finney.
Second.
By Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Finney. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Sabetta.
yes,
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria,
second,
second by Mrs. Sabetta. Discussion. So we received this resolution this evening. It's a lot split over at the First Mayland Properties. Mr. Balestria, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, this was a lot split for numerous splits on the mainland properties. It was unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. It was presented to council at the last meeting and needed the approval of the city engineer and review by the law director, and that was done, I understand, today. So that's why it's before us this evening.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Balestria? Mrs. Tressi?
Mr. Balestre, did we not just consolidate all of the permanent parcels
Into one, yes, we did.
into one?
And
now
then split from there.
we're splitting off from there. Thank you.
And there may be more in the future. You never know what kind of tenant he may get, so.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
yes,
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Resolution 2021-38 has been adopted. Now we will move to ordinances, starting with ordinance 2021-17. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-17, an ordinance creating a city fund to provide for the receipt and expenditure of federal funds distributed as part of the America Rescue Plan, setting out the expenses to be covered, authorizing the mayor and the director of finance to take all further steps to comply with the act, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
yes,
Mrs. Teresi, Snyder, excuse me.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Mano, second by Mrs. Tressi. Discussion. This ordinance will give the finance director the ability to create a fund for the monies from the American Rescue Plan. Is there anything you would like to add to this, Mrs. Hagan?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. We are expecting our first payment, our first tranche, to come in the end of this month, beginning of May, and then the second half of that will come in 1 year later.
Mr. DeJohn, thank you.
And then once the funds come in, then the council decides where those funds will go?
We are in the process of meeting internally to come up with some proposed uses for those funds that follow the guidelines. Unfortunately, the U.S. Treasury hasn't issued definitive guidelines yet. We're hoping those come out at the same time we get the money. The guidelines right now are still a little vague, and they are anticipating more detailed guidelines to come out. But obviously, this sets up the fund. We have not changed the appropriation amendment to spend that money yet. So in order to spend that money, we would come back to council for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you.
I apologize, that was a little long-winded of a yes.
Thank you, though. Okay, Mrs. Tressi, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mrs. Fagan, do we know how much money we would be receiving?
We do. The first payment will be approximately 1.8 million. The second payment will be equal to that. It's for a total of approximately 3.6 million.
The second will be 3.6 million, or total?
Total.
Total. Okay. All right, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. This ordinance has now been approved. Okay, next we will move to motions, starting with motion A. Mr. Murphy.
Motion to approve a final site plan for a new 175,074 square foot building for a Cube Smart self-storage facility at 1413 Golden Gate Boulevard.
Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano.
Second.
Second by Mr. Balestrea. Discussion. Going to move to you, Mr. Murphy.
I have nothing to,
Yeah.
the only thing is that this was held the last time because there were several meetings of the Architectural Board of Review that had to be had, and I'm not sure whether or not they've taken place yet. So,
Okay.
but council can, if council wants to approve this, they may.
Does any member of council have any question? The applicant's not here this evening. Okay. Roll call on the motion to approve.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Abstain?
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
No.
Mrs. Finney.
Abstain. I have a relationship with the owner of the building.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. So this is 4-1. So this motion is passed. There was a motion that was made by the law director this evening to add another motion for
Yes, the second motion would be to solicit bids for rock salt.
so I need a motion to solicit bid for rock salt.
So moved.
Moved by
Little
Mrs.
Finney.
Sabetta, second by Mrs. Finney. Discussion. Guess we need salt. Ugh, don't want to think about it right now. Are there any questions for motioning for this? Okay, roll call on the motion to approve.
Mrs. Finney.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn.
Yes.
Mr. Mano.
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes, this motion has been passed. Is there any new business or comments from council this evening? Mr. DeJohn?
Thank you, Madam President. Just one thing, we've had a lot of negative feedback on this connectivity study with Woodhawk and Gates Mills Boulevard. So I think as a council, maybe we should have a committee of the whole to sit down and discuss if we further want to pursue this connectivity study. Obviously, there's a lot of people in the city that want it, and there's a lot of people that don't want it. But, you know, rather than getting turned down for grants all the time because people don't want it, we maybe should come to a consensus as a council and decide whether we want to pursue this entire connectivity study in the city. That's all. Thank you.
We could put it out there and definitely have that discussion or call a committee of the whole meeting, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from council? Okay. There's also a motion, or a note that we had received that we need to have an executive session this evening. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
Move, Finney.
Moved by
Second.
Mrs. Finney, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to go into executive session.
Before we start that, for the purposes of collective bargaining.
Thank you.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Mano,
Yes.
Mr. Belstria.
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi.
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. It is now 8:08. We will go into executive session. I will remove myself from executive session.
Thanks, Dan.